Okay, and let's see. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can get this live stream going. Just a second. Okay, let's see. Hi everyone, welcome. It's just getting a little, okay, good, you can hear me, perfect. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our Day of Action. Just so you know, this is being recorded, but the chat box is not recorded. And any questions that you ask will be treated confidentially in the sense that I will ask the question out loud, but will not put a name to it. So you should feel free to ask questions or share things, even if you don't want your name attached to it in the recording. So welcome. We'll give just another minute for folks to join. We've got some folks joining right now. I see folks in the chat box saying hi. So hello to everyone. And just as we're allowing folks to come on, just a little quick background on the Day of Action to End Violence Against Women Living with HIV. This is the 5th year that we've had this Day of Action. Venita, were you, and Teresa, were you all around for the beginning? Do you want to explain a little how that got started?
Sure. It was really interesting. So we've had 2 murders of women living with HIV in Texas, Slye Bowden in probably early to mid 2000s, and then Alicia Henson around 2008 or 9. And another woman and myself here really took the Alicia Henson murder really personally and began to, and figured that we needed to do something. And we started kind of, we researched the DA and started sending letters. We started going to meetings and getting people to sign on. We start, to force the DA to do the right thing. We contacted the family to let them know that we cared. We really started going to groups and put out Facebook posts of people making statements about it, and just really trying to raise the level of awareness and get justice for Alicia. And PWN kind of reached out to us because the Dallas women had been doing some similar stuff in Dallas around the Slye Bowden murder, and Alicia Henson was from Lufkin, Texas, and said, how do we elevate this? And decided to start and begin to put our materials on the website, and then that evolved into the idea of creating a Day of Action. So it's very personal. It lets you know that 1 woman, 2 women can start a movement. And it's amazing to me that now we're in the 5th year of this, and we are still elevating the name of Alicia Henson. Was a 30-year-old white woman with 2 kids. And and Slye Bowden, I believe, had 2 or 3 sons. Someone can tell me. So, and now here we are in the 5th year of it.
Yeah. I think also that what started this for us was also the fact that there were silent voices that were not being heard. There were women who were suffering in silence and didn't think they had support. So someone had to be that voice for them. And we were starting a movement to be that for these women who were suffering in silence, and when it came to violence, intimate partner violence, and letting people know that there's women out here, here's a movement, there's support for them. And it just grew and grew and grew, and it became a national movement and campaign of the Day of Action. I can't believe it's 5 years myself. It went back so fast. But we continue to do that and bringing awareness to women about, not just women, let me back up and say not just women, but to our community, right? Because it's not just only a women's issue, only women should be concerned about it. This is everyone's problem. Everyone should be part of the solution, right? Because if we talk about building our community, we want to bring awareness that you can participate in ending violence against all women, especially women living with HIV.
And let me just add to that, we wanted to pressure the DA to not use these women's status as an excuse to excuse the murders. And both the men took deals, as a matter of fact, it's really weird, for 40 years, both of them, the gentleman in Dallas and the man in Lufkin, Texas. And so they both took a deal for 40 years that they're currently serving. So please.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving that really useful context around the Day of Action, because yeah, you all were like right there at the beginning of it, and still, yeah, 5 years later, unfortunately, it's still needed more than ever. You know, the ideal scenario would be like we don't need this day anymore because there's no more violence against women living with HIV, but sadly, we know this is not the case. So yeah, thank you.
Did we lose Jenny?
Yeah, I think so. So if everybody could just hold on a minute, looks like we're having technical difficulties.
Problems, issues, and Jenny will be right back on. Yeah, we know it's frozen. We're working on it.
Yeah. I don't know if we're still live or if we're not at all. We're still recording though.
Yes.
Okay, it is showing live on Facebook and recording.
Okay, good.
I have to say, you guys, when we started this, I never expected this. In the first year of the Day of Action in Houston, we couldn't get anybody to organize a physical event with us. So that's when we came up with this virtual flash blog as one of the first events we did here in Houston. And people from all over the country sent us poems and stories, and it was heartbreaking as well as inspiring that we could publish them virtually. And the more this has happened, the more voices and stories we hear that are heartbreaking. And I know you guys hear it too.
Yeah, I know when here in Philadelphia, because we do community events and bringing the community together, that we also brought together the community of people who were not women, who didn't identify as women, who were passionate about ending violence against women, wanted to participate in any way they could, right? For as the Day of Action, we had our male counterpartners join us for the Day of Action, the events. It also brought awareness that, you know, that they needed to know this was happening. You know, so long and for so ever long, we have been suffering in silence as women. That, you know, you just tight your bootstrings and keep on moving, and you don't talk about these things, right? And that just builds upon more trauma. So we want to bring a trauma-informed spectrum to this Day of Action about not just the violence, but how do we end the trauma that continues after the violence happens? Not just for the woman, but the family, anyone that's connected to her, you know, especially the community.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Hey.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. My internet just went out. I was in the middle of saying something and my internet went out. I apologize. I don't know if you heard, but I was asking for our panelists to introduce themselves. Have you all started doing that?
We just tried to freestyle for a second.
For a second, right?
I'm so sorry about that. It kicked me off and it took me a minute to get back on. I'm really sorry. Okay, great. So yeah, if you all can introduce yourselves, I was going to start in alphabetical order by last name. So Tiommi, that would mean starting with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tiommi Luckett. I am based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. I am the Positive Women Network Communications Assistant, as well as Block Project Coordinator. And I'm actually here at the Block training now, taking some time out to actually be a part of the PWNCares series. So welcome in, everybody. Glad that you're all able to make it.
Thank you. And let's see, next would be Venita.
Right. Hi, good afternoon again, everybody. My name is Venita Ray. I happen to currently be the Deputy Director for Positive Women's Network USA. I've been a long time, well, I call it a long time supporter, board member. I'm based here in Houston, Texas, one of the founding members of our Texas chapter, and really an advocate around intersectional issues, racial justice, and pushing for policies that support women living with HIV.
So I guess I'm next. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Sullivan. I'm based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am the PW National Co-Chair of the board. I come to this work as a woman living with HIV who has personally been affected by intimate partner violence, and I join these other women in our survivorship. I am also one of the founding members for the PW First chapter that came out of the National PWN, along with Wahida Shabazz L.
Awesome, thank you. And Ashley?
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Slye. I am with the National Network to End Domestic Violence. I am the project manager of our Positively Safe project, which looks at the intersection of domestic violence and HIV. I also work on housing issues, and we're based in Washington, D.C., but I currently am in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all.
Thank you so much for being here, all of you. Great, so to get started, we were going to show the video. We actually released it last year for the Day of Action, the PWNCares video, Living and Loving Well with HIV. Some of you may have already seen it. Some of you may not have. Either way, it's worth watching again because these women are just amazing and their stories are amazing, and I think that a lot of folks here can relate to them. So we'll watch that, and then we'll allow our panelists a chance to add anything they want to about the video or about the stories they shared in the video, any kind of context that they would like to add, and then we will open it up for questions and general discussion. And so just just for quick housekeeping, if you have a question at any time, whether it's during the video or after, whenever, you can use that Q&A box that's at the bottom. It should be at the bottom of your screen. There's a little black menu bar. If you click the Q&A box and put the question in there, I can ask our panelists whenever there's a good moment to ask. If you put it in the chat box, there's a good chance that we may not see it because the chat box tends to move pretty quickly. So yeah, if there's a question you would like shared with everyone, or if there's a comment that you would like us to share publicly, please make sure to put it in the Q&A box rather than in the chat box. Let's just use the chat box for general conversation for chatting. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen so we can watch this video. Let's see here, give me one sec. Hopefully I'm not gonna have any more technical difficulties. Share computer sound, here we go. Everyone can hear?
Love is an action word, so one of the things you can tell me you love me, but if you treat me differently, that is not love.
There were so many red flags. Red flags I chose to ignore. I didn't overlook them. I just ignored them.
A healthy relationship looks like having my own independence and my own voice.
My early ideas about healthy relationships were non-existent, very distorted. Raised by a single mom who had alcohol and mental health issues. And so to me, love was kind of emotional blackmail. You love her, but she treats you bad. So I didn't really have a really good concept of love. It felt like weakness. It didn't feel safe.
I guess like any other little girl, that I was this princess, and that I'm gonna find my prince, and he's gonna whip me off my feet, and we're gonna have this wonderful castle and a couple of kids, and I didn't have to work, right? And all the little things that little girls dream of, right? I know when you was a little girl, you think that life is so good. But as you grow up, you find out it's different.
When I was starting to date, God, when I was starting to date, I was so lost, so very lost. I zero converted while I was in a relationship, did not know it, and almost a year after that happened, I was single. And that's when I went through that 3-month process, by myself and just thinking that I would never date again. I just knew that my life was over. Had learned my diagnosis, gotten into treatment, been undetectable for a few years. And this guy comes along. I had to share my diagnosis with him. So I put myself in like a pretty dangerous spot, not knowing what his reaction would be. He was okay with the fact that I was trans, but I didn't know how he would react to finding out that I was living with HIV.
First, I tried to avoid him, then I told him, and he tested negative. And what happened for me was so interesting. Before I tested positive and he tested negative, I was this sexy woman. After he tested negative, the Christian in him came out, and God spared him because his mission was to work with me, the sinner woman. So I went from this sexy woman to a project, and it crushed me. Like, oh my God, I've lost my womanhood, and I really proceeded not to talk with him anymore, but it was devastating.
I was in a relationship when I first was diagnosed in 1996, and the person I was in a relationship happened to be my abuser. Used to tell me that, no one's going to love you like I'm going to love you. No one's going to want you because of your status. And I believed all those things that he said. Because of myself, I had like low self-esteem. When I got that diagnosis, I thought my world was going to crumble. And I wanted to be loved, and here was this person that was willing to say that he loved me unconditionally, but there were some things attached to that.
I met my daughter's father when I was 13 or something, and he was abusive, and I stayed with him till I was 28. The first time I was hit at 17 was a sign, and it came out of the blue, and I did not go. We both used drugs together, and when I got about 27, I decided to get sober. And even though I wanted to be with him because I didn't know any other way, it wasn't good. It was just familiar. I realized one night to stay with him meant I had to stay in a world of drugs and alcohol because he was still using. And that was kind of the final straw. I did not want to live like that anymore. I wanted to show my daughter something different. And I called AA, I'm sure, and said I needed help. And I began to go to 12-step meetings. It took a long time to finally allow myself to be vulnerable with these people and let them help me. And they showed me what love was. They showed me love was power. They showed me that surrender was not weakness. And eventually supported me through going back to school, raising my daughter, and everything. I just didn't know how much help I really needed at the time.
I can't count how many times I said, okay, let's give him a second chance. And I went back. But there was one last time where I decided to leave, and my abuser sent me to jail for leaving. So what I did while I was there is I connected myself to some other women in a support group of women that were there who were suffering from intimate partner violence just like me, and came strong. My abuser visited me in jail. If you come back home with me, I'll drop the charges. By then, I didn't got all the support. I was really strong, and I was like, no, God got me. I kept telling myself that God got me, right? And I didn't go back. And a week later, they told me because he didn't show up in any of the courts hearings, they dropped the charges. It wasn't the way I wanted to get out, but I got out. And I got out with my life.
the lying, what are you doing? Why are you not working? And why are you angry? Why are you angry at me? This is, mental abuse. This is verbal abuse. And it got physical. You're not welcome here. I cried as I said it. But I said it enough until I meant it. To leave that relationship, my strength came from the fact that he wasn't there.
I didn't know at the time that no one else could heal what was hurt, what was wrong.
Yoga led me back to the light. It was the beginning of the shift from darkness. In the beginning, it was that the breathing, the breath is everything. And I began to visualize who I wanted to be. I began to think I can be healthy. And my T cells doubled. Everything changed.
I didn't tell my story about my intimate partner violence relationship for years. The support and strength that supported me to heal through that process was family. My son was still alive at that time. His door was always open. Connect myself to PWN. A healthy relationship looks like having my own independence and my own voice. Mutual respect.
Absolutely trust, mutual respect, communication. Some of these are not things I do well.
I don't want that like across the room type thing, because that's like pheromones, like that's chemical reactions, but I want something that's genuine. I want someone who is genuinely concerned about my well-being, someone who's going to be like, hey, did you eat breakfast this morning? Have you eaten? Not like, where are you? What are you doing? Not that, but someone who's genuinely concerned about my health and well-being.
You're not alone. There's support and people just like you and women just like you. I'm one of them. I'm a woman living with HIV. And I'm not just a woman living with HIV. I'm a woman living and thriving with HIV.
I really relate to feeling scared, feeling angry, not wanting to live, being HIV positive. Everybody isn't ready to just be happy. Yeah, and we need to be there and just let them. And when you're ready, we got you.
Wow. Thank you all again so much. That I've seen that video many times, but it's still really impactful to me. Really, really powerful. So yeah, I wanted to give our panelists a chance to say anything that you would like to say about the video or about any of the stories you shared in the video, anything you would like to add or contextualize. Please feel free to go ahead and jump in and do that.
Sure, this is Teresa. Like you, Jenny, I've seen this video a lot of times. I watched it, I showed it to the women that I teach, just so they, feel like they can see this and understand that, there's someone out there. It's not just something that happens in a silo. And every time I see this, I actually tear up, and not so much because I'm sad or because of what I had to go through. It's the fact that I got through, and that watching Tiommi and Venita tell their stories, and watching the power that they hold today, right, to get through something, because it's an old saying that you got to go through something to get through something, you know, and we all did that, and we have a survivorship today, and this survivorship is going to continue to grow as long as we keep bringing awareness that this is happening. This is happening more than what people recognize, you know, or they're turning a blind eye to, especially in the government. When we got the Me Too campaign going out, this is really happening to women that you don't think it would happen to, right? And we need to bring it and continue to bring this awareness to it so we can end it, right? And let women have that time so they can heal. Yeah, so I was sitting here watching this, and I was just like trying not to like water up my glasses, you know, and wipe off my tears, you know, every time I hear the story that I hear myself talk about what I went through, and, you know, and it's just tears of joy, you know, that I actually got through there, and I actually got to a place where I actually could tell my story and hope it heals and helps and impacts another woman's life.
I just wanted to share, you guys will hear some background noise. Like I said, I'm in the training room right now. But what I wanted to share was that the reason why I stayed through it, you know, I felt like I had to settle. I felt like that was the best that life was going to offer me. Like, here was this man that was willing to be seen with me. I'm an out trans woman, you know, out living with HIV, and I just really felt like I had to settle. But then, you know, it took that absence from him for me to realize like what my worth is and how valuable I am. And it was at that point where I decided, you know, like, regardless of being trans, regardless of living with HIV, there is no way that I'm going to allow anybody to have that type of power and control over my life again. And I meant that. So, you know, a lot of people see that, you know, I'm not in a relationship right now and that's through social media, but I'm like, I'm getting back to me. I am getting back to the person that I know that I can be, you know, and I'm not trying to live for anyone else. It's for me. It is high time that I take my life in my hands, right? And stop giving so many people control over what my next move is going to be, or if I'm going to make a move at all, right? And so now, like, with everything that is happening, the violence is just being compounded upon us at every turn, right? Just 2 days ago, the Trump administration said that they're going to write me out of existence, you know, but I know that me and my family at PWN is not going to allow that to happen, right? As well as all of the people that I've been connected with since I've been like in the advocacy field, right? Because it's more than just, this impacts all of us. It really does. And this type of intimate partner violence, it touches us. It touches everyone that is under the sound of my voice. And women living with HIV, we experience it at rates higher and, you know, higher than our negative counterparts. So that's just what I wanted to add, you know, in context why I stayed.
I guess I would say that, yeah, every time I see this, it like hits me in the stomach. But I need to say that I never imagined that all of that stuff could provide a ray of hope to anyone ever. It just, that was not, as I sit here now, it just amazes me. I need to say that all I knew was violence. What I allowed on the outside to occur was the way that I felt about me on the inside. And it, you know, one of the things I really try to practice doing is only sharing my experience. I don't want to preach, tell someone they should leave, should stay, only what I felt like and what it took. And leaving that relationship for me took a village. And people really literally had to put me back together again. I couldn't even say the me I knew, because I never knew a me. It was all that I knew before that person. It was the home life that was not okay. So, and people have done that for me when I've been able to allow them, and it wasn't easy because I didn't trust. Vulnerability to me was a 4-letter word. you know, and love was a sucker's play. So for me, I don't try to preach. I'm so incredibly grateful that I could live a different example, but I'm so straight connected to the reality of what it was and who I was. And I attracted the things in my life that I felt on the inside. And, being diagnosed with HIV years later, what I'm aware of is that whether the violence immediately led to an HIV diagnosis or the conditions around intersectionality, our identities and multiple oppressions, and those structural kind of issues that made us vulnerable, that 18 years or 20 years later, I would end up becoming HIV positive. My stories is still the same with all my sisters. Some of the facts and names may be different. So I applaud all of my other sisters on this webinar, and I applaud those of you that are on this journey with me, and to know, it is possible, and I never thought it would be.
Thank you all so much. Ashley, did you want to add anything from a sort of more like provider perspective?
Sure. The three of you touched on so many different aspects of domestic violence. And I think that's so important to highlight, is each experience is so different. What it looks like, how people process that, is really individualized. And we as providers have to come from a trauma-informed lens. And I love that Teresa brought that up. It's so important that we're not just looking at the domestic violence in a this really narrow lens. It's so much broader than that. And the way we respond to trauma is so different from person to person. So we have to continuously be exploring, how we're handling this work and who's a part of this work, and making sure that survivors of all backgrounds and those living with HIV have a voice in this work, and making sure they're heard.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we can open it up to questions or comments if folks have comments or would like to share any experiences of their own. And actually, while I wait for folks to, we did have a comment. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories and vulnerabilities with us all. This is so powerful, and I totally agree. And I think most people on here agree with that. While I give folks a chance to put any questions or comments you have in the Q&A box, I do have a poll question. This is totally anonymous, so you can be as honest as you want to be. So I'm launching it right now. You should be able to see it. So the question is, have you ever been mentally, physically, sexually, financially, or emotionally abused by someone you loved? And I should extend that to someone you trusted. And so I intentionally made this question broad, so it could be an intimate partner. We could also be talking about child abuse by family members, but just sort of to get a picture of how common this is in our community. I'll give folks just a minute to answer if you haven't already. So I will go ahead and close the poll. And so just to share the results, 93% of the folks who answered on here have experienced some type of abuse from someone they loved or trusted. We only had one person say that they had not. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah. And so I think that means that a lot of folks on here can certainly understand what our panelists have been through, and how challenging it can be both to get out of that situation, to avoid being in that situation. So let's see, I've got a question here. What would you tell an individual who has no outlook or safe place to go when she truly wants to get out? And what if she doesn't know, what if she just doesn't know what to do or where to begin? anyone who wants to answer can go ahead and jump in.
So this is Teresa. I think that's all our stories in the beginning. That we don't have the resources. We dug in so deep into this horrible abusive relationship that became so dependent financially, emotionally, and even sometimes spiritually upon this person that we don't know how to get out. We don't have no resources. Some of us were brought up in families that we were told that, just keep going, just take it, you'll be okay. Just get to the next day. So for a woman who's just starting out and don't have, the resources right at her fingertips, right? I would tell her first, have a plan, right? Don't tell this person that you're leaving. That was my mistake, right? And I wound up in jail for something I didn't do that he claimed I did. Go find some resources. Talk to somebody, right? The shame, it doesn't lie when in not talking about it. It's about not talking about it, right? And believe and trust your gut that someone's going to hear you. Someone's going to support you, right? If ever it's a family member, or sometimes it's best to have someone who's not part of your family, right? To get, help you research some resources for yourself. There's a lot of stuff out here. We live in a technology world that you can find stuff on the internet, right, real quickly, and make a list of resources and safe havens that you can go to. But the first thing I would tell them, have a plan. Don't tell your abuser you're leaving. That's the biggest mistake.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It is definitely important to plan the exit and to know that you are actually going to do it. I would also suggest, like in the day of cell phones, like smartphones, to actually Google like a domestic violence hotline, talk to someone, get on the phone with someone, because chances are, I don't know what the situation is, but, like most male abusers, like leave the house and go to work, right? But it's still like that power dynamic to where it's so mentally ingrained that you need this person, that you don't actually take that first step to see if there are resources available. So you're going to have to do that person is going to have to do a little research. Google, see what the domestic violence hotline is going to tell them, but also plan to exit. And also, now this is just for your protection because we don't know how violent it could get. And I would much rather read about the abuser being, like no longer with us than the woman not being with us. So research your self-defense state, research your state for self-defense laws, right? Because what I can guarantee is that Arkansas doesn't have one. And so that's why some of the women who have actually fought back have gone to prison, because Arkansas doesn't have a self-defense law. So know that before you actually try to like protect you, your family, your whoever it is, right? Because men have been getting away with this shit for too long, for like way too long. And so because of the power dynamic and the bro code and all of this other stuff. But yeah, plan your exit. Do not let him know or anyone know that is tied to him that you're planning to leave. This is your task. You're on a secret covert mission and nobody needs to know about it. Get out, right? Just something to think about. Not saying that they have to do this tomorrow, but just something to think about, like to actually plan to leave.
Thank you, Tiommi and Teresa. I was trying to think back to what it felt like when I first heard the question. I was so knee deep in drugs and alcohol myself that I couldn't plan. I was not, very enough to think through it. But what I do know is, during the years, family or people all had advice for me to get out and do this. And I wore people out by saying I was leaving, then going back. And so then people weren't as willing to be there. And then it became embarrassing. I do remember one time, and he had told me, if you leave again, I will kill you. And I remember trying to leave and ended up with 2 black eyes. And because I still wasn't ready. So one of the first things is really being ready, knowing deep in my gut that, in my soul, that I couldn't deal with another day of this, because that back and forth, I mean, I still have scars. And then the drugs and alcohol just compounded it, and I wasn't able to plan or think beyond the present. So I had to do a few things, and one of them was I did a quick overnight geographical, just on a run, and I got sober. And getting sober and finding another group of people, because my whole world existed in that place, were people who finally, as I shared a little bit about what was going on over time, because it didn't come at first, were able to give me strength to keep moving forward, even though I kept feeling like my heart was back there. And so it took me a long time to really know that I could live without it. So, I think finding a trusted friend, a stranger, a pastor, I wasn't a church person, so I'm not saying that, that I could have in my pocket for when that day came, that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, at least for the day, that I couldn't deal. Including family members and stuff became just problematic for me, and they began to turn their backs and different stuff. So for my situation involved drugs and alcohol in addition to the abuse. So it was a difficult thing to create a plan to go from that, other than for me, I had to jump up, leave a city, everything I knew, and get sober. And those multiple things allowed me to deal with at least an issue at a time that held me back. So, and getting sober allowed me to make the decision that I couldn't live in that life, and that I was worthy and deserving of something different. Because before that, I think even if I hadn't went back to him, I would have probably been attracted another person like that, because I still wouldn't have felt worthy. So it was a process, and that question hit me in the gut. Thank God for internet today too. But again, it's a personal and a soul searching decision of when enough is enough.
The only thing I feel like I would add to that, because I think you all brought up really great points. And Tiommi, you mentioned the hotline, which has some actual template safety plans on it for people that just don't know where to start, because it can be very overwhelming at times. But if you aren't sure of like the local agency in your community, they can connect you to that local agency, the state coalition. So there's a domestic violence or a dual domestic violence sexual assault coalition in every state. And they should have a list of local programs and often what they offer. I know housing is like one of the biggest barriers for survivors. So that can be overwhelming in itself, of thinking of, where am I going to live? Emergency shelter is temporary. So what comes after that? So many programs today offer housing outside of just emergency shelter. So whether it's rapid rehousing, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, hopefully they can connect you to any other resources in the community, even if they don't have those housing resources. But just, I think, Venita, you touched on a number of points around how important it is to be supportive of survivors and how challenging it can be when you're trying to leave. It's, a really dangerous time for survivors. And for a number of them, that is a reason why they, go back 7 to 8 times before they're able to leave. So just continue to listen and be supportive, be non-judgmental. Never blame the survivor for the abuse. I think too often we hear, well, why did she stay? Instead, we should be asking, why is he abusing, or why are they abusing? So I think, we have to change the conversation around them. So just be supportive, no matter what they choose. If they do decide to stay or leave, many of them just want the abuse to stop. They love this individual. So.
That was great. I just want to add another thing, Jenny, before we move forward. I often teach, that you don't have to have the answer right then, right? It's good to have tools, not rules. because all the rules are not going to apply. But making sure that women have these tools and they have knowledge of these tools and how to use them, even if they're not ready to use them, right?
And, I think this is a good point to bring in. One of the reasons why I'm
sorry. Tools, not rules, right? Make sure women have these tools, at their fingertips somewhere written down in the book, the hotlines, even though that, because, like I said in my video when I was telling you about my own personal journey, is that I went back several times. I can't even count how many times I went back, because that's all I knew, even though I knew it wasn't safe, but this is all I knew, and I was burning out my family. I was lucky to have a son that no matter what, his door was always open. And when I showed up, he shook his head, but he said, "Hey, Mom, there's gonna come time you want us to leave." And he said, "When that time comes, I'll be here." And he was, but making sure women have tools, and not judging them when they use them. They're gonna use them when they need them the most, but making sure they have something that they can access, so they can get in a safe haven away from their abuse, so they can heal from their trauma.
I guess I want to add this, that now in the seat that I'm in, or in some of us maybe on this call, and Ashley, thank you for talking about, services, but I don't think there's enough resources and services out there. And to really be advocating and elevating this conversation around structural support and need, for policy, our hotline here, if you call it, 2 years ago on this National Day of Action, we did an event at a domestic violence center here in Houston. And right in the middle of this, of our event, one of our chapter members really just exploded crying and saying she was in this situation right then, but she hadn't told anyone till then. And we stopped the event, and I thought, oh my God, at least it happened here at this service place. And do you know, even though there was staff in the room, she was given an 800 number to call. She was never able to get in a shelter because they were always so full. And, it's hard to access those services. And here 2 years later, and as a matter of fact, just last month, I helped her relocate to Las Vegas. I didn't want her to go, but she just didn't feel like she could stay here and start over again, because she couldn't disconnect from the dysfunctional biological family and that person. So right now she's doing a domestic violence course out there, and is since the beginning of September. She's been gone, and I'm planning to go see her, but we're in a seat to keep elevating the structural things. We talk about work requirements for Medicaid. We talk about all these other strings that make access to income, services. I think domestic violence organizations do a great job, but I just don't think there's enough. My provider, when I would go in, there's you get the medical assistant, and they have these disclosure-based questions that say, have you been involved in domestic violence? And they're looking down, and I always tell them, if I was, I would not tell you yes, because you didn't even look me in the eye when you asked. So I don't think that disclosure-based is kind of provider interaction is always the greatest. We have to look beyond the answers and look for other signs, I believe. So, advocating for more resources and services and greater awareness, I think is needed. And again, this person bust out in the middle at this place, but never got a service, and broke my heart. I don't understand, but today she had to go, and she is feeling freedom for the first time.
Awesome. That's so awesome. And I thank you, Venita, for bringing that to the light, that fact that we don't have enough resources, and, the infrastructures that are built inside, not just the domestic violence and the physical beatdown, right? But the housing and the employment for the women to get her own job. Resources need to happen for women in order for them to get out of these relationships and feel like they get their own independence, and they all have to go back and depend. But no one's talking about the children that comes in along inside that spectrum of intimate partner violence. No one brings the light that yes, it's important to talk about the woman that's going through it, yes, but let's not forget about the babies, right? That also that we drag through the struggle of us struggling to get out, right? So what resources when we talk about policies that we have in place for the children who are also impacted by intimate partner violence. What about them? What's set up for them, right? And we need to look at that and try to develop some resources for these children. And I'm not talking about that. Ask them, are you okay? Do you feel safe? That's not enough. You know, because people forget that trauma is so deep that it manifests itself not right there on the spot, but later on in life. About how they interact with the community, how they interact with partnerships, how they interact with their own selves as human beings. So if we can catch that early trauma with kids early on to go through this process of the partner violence with their parents and their moms, then we're doing a service for them. So we must build upon resources for the women and the children that also struggle through the intimate partner violence relationship along beside us.
And I just want to add, Venita, I think you're spot on in terms of like the lack of resources out there. You know, every year NNEDV does a one-day count of domestic violence shelters. We just did ours a little over a month ago for 2018, but in 2017, there were over 11,000 requests for services that just did not go met for a variety of reasons, whether it was funding shortages, staffing shortages, or whatever. So NNEDV continues to push the federal government, obviously, to provide more funding, but I think it also comes down to state level. You know, what's happening at the state level? How are they funding these programs, or are they basically left to receive federal funding, which isn't a whole lot, unfortunately. I mean, we have been fairly lucky with the increase to the Victims of Crime Act funding, which is good, but again, it's not enough. We're still missing so many survivors that could use our help. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you all for, that's a lot of really important points that you all just addressed. We have a question here. I hear a lot of women who experience violence say they've gone into 12-step programs. Do you feel like that was a safe place to start your journey out of violence? I'm guessing this is probably for Venita. I still get intimate partner violence from my roommate. I actually missed 2 appointments yesterday because he was being emotionally abusive. I'm in a different place today and I'm safe. I'm thinking of going into sober living to have a safe place to live.
Oh God, can you just repeat that? Because I just went totally.
Yeah, she was asking about going into 12-step programs and if that's a safe place to start your journey out of violence, like if going into a sober living place to start to escape from an IPV situation might be a good place to start.
It is something I've seen a lot of because of this intersection of substance abuse and people, substance abuse is a deeper issue than just drinking or using a substance, and the need for housing and a place to go. So sometimes that transitional place dealing with substance abuse is that logical or first place if you can't find another service. I've seen a lot of women do that. I've been involved around recovery for over 30 years now, and it was in recovery that I learned how deep this issue was for other women. One of the challenges with even recovery, though, there's not a lot of recovery places out there for women that you can bring your child. So, left with the prospect of maybe being able to get into recovery yourself, but I can count places on one hand over all these years that I've found that take children. Typically what I've seen, a woman doesn't get there until CPS is involved or something else, or if there's a trusted family member who can take that child. So it becomes a real challenge, but it can be a great first step with the other support because of the need for housing, and you're dealing with, multiple issues, or, that domestic violence is clearly one major one, but substance too. But the fact that there's not a lot of places that take your children, I think limits that option for women, and we either don't get to access that till we're in the CPS system or something else goes on. If you go around recovery homes around the country, you'll see mostly men. They're, men. So yes, it is a good first step, not enough of it, and we need more that allow a woman to take her child and her children with her. And it definitely was a good first step for me. I wasn't able to talk about the domestic violence first, or that abuse and what I grown up in first. I was able to deal with the initial substance issue. And as I got more comfortable and trusting, I was able to share some of the other stuff, but that took a while.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? Or? And then we've got a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So PWN, we center some of our policies around women-centered care, right? And we talk about that in a way where we're not just talking about making sure that the woman's getting services and resources for herself, but including her children, right? Because as women, we come with children. We're caregivers. We're nurturers, right? Especially when we are going through intimate partner violence, and there's not enough services that says, okay, we'll take you, but we can't take your kids. Right? So you further traumatize me. Well, I'm already being traumatized through the intimate partner violence that I just left. Right? So now you're going to take away the one thing I love dearly and trying to keep safe is my child. Right? So I think that we need to have more safe havens where women can go, because we want to get a few here in Philadelphia as well. That takes women and children who are leaving intimate partner violence relationships. A lot of our shelters, like Venita said, are geared to men, right? There's a few that are just for women, but there's got to be more for women to take their children with them, right? Because I said, our children go through this, right? And it manifests themselves on the spot in school, how they react to teachers, how they learn, right? How they grow up as adults, how they interact with partnerships as they grow into their adulthood, right? So we need to also address making sure that we are taking care of them as well and have more safe havens for both the woman and the child together, not separate.
Thank you for that. It's super important. And we know that also abusers tend to, if there are young children involved, they tend to use them as sort of leverage to get women to stay, because they need a roof over the kid's head. They don't want to be separated from the kid, and they don't have anywhere to go. So yeah, it's unfortunately children can get used in really bad ways as well. We have a question here. How do you deal with the guilt of leaving? For instance, they need me. Any thoughts on that?
That was the situation that I was in. I said it to friends. This person was supposed to come and just chill with me for a weekend and ended up staying for 14 months, right? And so at that point, I did feel like, this person needed me, and what would they do, like, if I wasn't around? But at the same time, like, it went from verbal abuse and emotional abuse to physical abuse. And I kind of was like more needing him in my space than he needed to be there, right? So I had to check myself. And when I told him that I did not want him to come back, because as I stated in the video, this guy had went off to a different state for work, short-term work. And I was in a position to where, we need this money. But then it came down to like, what will it be when he gets back? What will the situation be when he doesn't have money? Or if he does come back with money, will he do right by it? Right? Because I was paying everything on my own anyway. And I cried as I told him over the phone that he could not come back. But I said it enough, in spite of what he was countering with me with, I said it enough to where I actually meant it. You cannot come back here. Like, and I got over that. I got over that in that moment. Did it resurface? Yes. Why? Because I'm human. I got lonely, but I had to think about like what was best for me, not what was best for him, because he didn't care what was best for me. Experience showed it, right? And I'm using he because that's what I'm attracted to. But yeah, like even if the situation was reversed and it's two women, if that person is abusive to you, then that's not love. That is not love. You know, and I saw it growing up. I witnessed it in the household, you know. My sister even went through it. My sister went through it to the point to where her bones were broken. You know, she could barely like get up the stairs without help. I witnessed all of that. And that was disguised as love because that's what I was told. So when I was in a relationship and it didn't get that serious, I had seen that guilt before. I had seen it. You know, I had experienced it. But what's more important, that person's feelings or mine? To me, like what's more important to me? Because if someone else's feelings are more important to me than my own feelings, then yeah, I'm going to deal with that abuse. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to keep taking them back. I'm going to suggest that they need me more than I need them, right? But if I'm what's important in my life, forget them. Guilt is an emotion, happiness is an emotion, sadness is an emotion. We feel them all at some point and we move on, right? That's what I'm saying. Don't let it, because in addiction, like guilt is huge. It's huge. Guilt, shame, all of that is huge in addiction. And I'm someone who has actually gone through addiction. I've gone through recovery. I no longer do cocaine, but I also don't just settle. And that's part of this. That is part of the healing process and getting back to me and realizing that I'm not just going to settle for anything. And yeah, I felt bad, but this is a whole adult, you know, who is physically capable of taking care of himself. And that's what I had to realize. You'll get over the guilt. Trust me. They don't feel any guilt. You'll get over it too.
You know, I'm almost kind of glad that question came up. It was kind of where I was thinking about in my last comment, because one of the things I think that was a double whammy is societal images and ideas about womanhood and motherhood. And, you know, everybody, a little piece of man is better than no man at all. And all of these ideas about you're less of a mother if you leave your kids, even if you're trying to survive or whatever. And those are real kind of social pressures to, you know, well, at least he brings his paycheck home or something, whether he does or doesn't. But, you know, people, it's always these excuses. And I have found in recovery, I'm already feeling guilty as a woman. I wish that the love of my child and the love of myself could stop me from drinking and using, and it doesn't. The love of myself, the love of my child can make my home safer, and it doesn't. So when this is why I think this is such a deep issue and so layered. It's not a simple answer for any of this to leaving. And when I'm out there drinking and using, I'm with the guys, when he fall down and get drunk, society doesn't look at him the same way as they looked at me, or having to leave home, or even let myself be in the situation, or accepting the situation. It's so many conflicting messages, I think, for women about who we are, who we love, and how we should take care of the world besides us. So I think this is a tough one as women, whether you have kids or not, and women with children, fighting against societal images that I need to stay a couple even if it kills me, or what I have to do to make sure I provide for my child are really just tough pressures of keep us kind of in bondage. And so you got to list all that to
yeah, Venita, you know, because people, like, it goes back to like violence is not about the physical beatdown. I say that so often. It's always about power and control. And one of those tools that they use against you so you don't leave is guilt. You know, I'm going to pay on her guilt, make her feel really bad. If she leaves me, this is going to happen to me. Or if you make you feel bad if there's children involved, you know, you're leaving your children. You're a bad mother, right? Or, you know, our society or our family saying, like, you just stay there with the kids. You know, the kids really need y'all to be together so y'all can be a whole family. Newsflash, it's a very dysfunctional family, right? And you're putting these kids through this, and they're going to grow up and they're going to have this trauma, right? So when we talk about intimate partner violence, like you said, we got to talk about the layers of it. It's not just about the physical, the mental, and the emotional. It's about the tools that our abusers use to keep us controlled. And one of those things are guilt. So and when I left, I did not feel guilty, not at all. In the beginning of several times when I did kept going back, I did, but I got to a point where I had no guilt. What I was concerned about is living, because it got to the point that this man was going to kill me, right? And I wanted to live. That's all I wanted to add.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad that question came up, and I really liked the way you all answered it. And I think it's really important to recognize that emotions don't actually happen in a vacuum. Like, we feel like emotions just kind of come out of nowhere, or they're totally natural, but a lot of the emotions that we feel are based on the way that we're socialized, on the messages that we've been given. Like Teresa said, it can, a lot of times the abuser is going to be giving you that pressure as a means to make you stay, or based on the type of family you grew up in, where it's like the worst thing in the world that could happen, that you would leave your husband, or there's a lot of different pressures that make us feel the way we feel. It doesn't just kind of come out of nowhere. It's a lot of times those are outside influences that actually provoke emotions in us that are not always to our benefit. So I think it's important to name that as well. Thanks. I've got a question here about basically, if I'm understanding the question right, what about if you need to remove someone who's been living with you long enough to be considered a tenant of the place that you're living, but he refuses to leave? How can you get that person to leave without getting evicted yourself? This is a really tricky question. Ashley, do you know anything about that?
I can share a little bit of information. This is not my area of expertise when it does come to housing stuff, but the Violence Against Women Act does address lease bifurcation. So if somebody is on the lease, so if they're not, that's another challenge. But if they are on your lease, you do have the right to have your lease amended, basically, and then removed, or even yourself removed from the lease. I recommend that you reach out to your local legal aid. They're going to have a better understanding of what that process looks like. There's some resources online that talk a bit about this. A couple of agencies that might be able to provide more information. The National Housing Law Project, they're based out of San Francisco, but they know a little bit more about the ins and outs of the law and how that applies to survivors. There's the safehousingpartnerships.org website that's really helpful. And you can also ask for technical assistance via the website. So that is an option. If they are there and not on the lease, you may have to get some legal assistance in terms of having them evicted. But again, I would definitely ask somebody locally about more of the laws, particularly local laws as it regards to tenants, and state laws, because they do vary state to state.
Ashley, thank you for that. I said Ashley, but my phone was on mute because I wanted to hear from you. What I want to say about that is the woman that I just moved to Las Vegas, the police were called a number of times and never let him go, because even though he wasn't on the lease, there is tenant protection for even occupants. And so there's the reality, then there's the legality, and they don't always, see eye to eye, the time to access those resources. In my situation, he would take my car, he wouldn't leave, he would, and police were called to this woman that I love dearly recently, and even when I was younger, that didn't solve the issue. And police refused to just take this man out, even though he wasn't on her lease. The rental office couldn't do anything because he had tenant protection as an occupant that you got to steal. So I agree that there's local laws that really get into this. Restraining orders and all that are still a challenge that you got to go through. But the question is a tough one. And I don't have the answer. I was just trying to bring out that the reality doesn't always match the legality of what the federal law or some other law might say may not help you immediately in the real time situation. So
Yeah, that is very true in terms of what the law looks like in theory versus practice. We see that across the country, how things are, I guess, applied at the local level are not consistent. And one thing that we've been looking a lot into is addressing nuisance ordinances. You brought this up around if the police are called so many times, that creates another area of concern for a survivor because they may be evicted for something they have no control over. So we've been trying to work with the National Housing Law Project to figure out what's happening across the country, community to community, and try and have some of these laws overturned that are very harmful to survivors. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Venita.
Thank you both. And there's a comment here that most hotels offer a free room if a person or family shows up in the midst of a domestic violence situation. In Virginia, they have protocols and will protect you to save you until you can get on your own. I don't know if there's any actual policies around that, or is that something that some hotels might just do? I'm not sure if anyone on here knows the answer to that.
No, I don't. That's the first time I've heard that. As far as like a hotel putting a person up. But I know it doesn't exist reality that for women. But it's something that can be looked at as something that can be offered to women as they're trying to exit out of this intimate partner violence relationship. A whole lot of policies need to be built around this that are going to be centered around the women and the children. And other communities, organizations need to get involved, right, and make sure it happens. Not turning a blind eye. Too often we turn a blind eye to the situation.
I have never heard that the hotels just do it on their own. I know here in Houston, there are some organizations that have some limited funds to provide emergency hotel, but it's not very long. So I don't know much more than that. Just, to get you, it might be a weekend, it could be 7 days if you can access it. That's the only hotel access I'm aware of.
Yeah, I would imagine that if that is a possibility in some cases, that it's probably pretty temporary. Even on our Twitter chat the last hour, one of the questions was around the biggest barriers to safety for survivors, and the number one that came up over and over was housing. We're seeing all these funding cuts for all kinds of different social programs, including housing, including SNAP, which is food stamps, including different types of Medicaid, programs that provide benefits. How do you all think that those cuts impact safety for survivors of intimate partner violence or other forms of violence in the home?
I mean, honestly, if you look at it like with what they're cutting, then it's kind of like leaving them in that situation, right? I mean, like, I know that for my mom did not want to get on like public assistance, any type of public assistance, but there was a time when she had to, and she defended herself against my dad, right? But I can't imagine like if what's going on now had actually happened then. Like when she was ready to go, when she found her independence, she wouldn't have been able to feed us, right? Because they're taking SNAP. She wouldn't have been able to get TANF because she would have had to work, but we were small kids, right? So who was going to keep us? My older sisters and brothers, they had all moved out of the house and had moved out of the state. So if she didn't have those things available, she probably would have been forced to stay in an abusive relationship, right? And who knows if the abuse would have just stopped with her and not gone on to us, right? But she was able to leave at a time when these services were available. And I mean, she didn't stay on it, but she did what she had to do at that time for her safety and the safety of her children, myself included, and the twin brothers after me, right? She had housing, her bills were paid, She had food for us to eat. Like, we still went to school, didn't miss a day of school. We didn't have to move out of the state. Like, we didn't have to do any of that. Only thing that was different was that my dad was no longer in the house. But today with the policies that are in place right now, it's like they're forcing women, these battered women, to stay in these abusive situations because they're taking away the resources that are out there. I
totally agree. I totally agree. That, you know, for a lot of women who already are in these intimate partner violence relationships, and a lot of this, or some of them are already financially dependent on their abuser, right? So if you're taking away resources that once they leave, they need to survive and feed themselves, and the little money that does come on the welfare programs to pay that low income rent, to be in a safe environment, once they leave the shelters, then you're just saying that it's okay for them to be abused, and that just will escalate more women losing their lives because they're going to stay, right? Why should I leave if I don't have nothing to leave with or nothing to gain once I leave, right? If you take away SNAP, if you take away the housing, low-income housing programs that women need to house themselves along with their kids, right? And safe havens. Some places, you know, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it, these shelters won't take you in unless you got some kind of welfare benefits, like the money you get up your food stamps or your Social Security. Some of them will not take you, and that's a bad policy because some of these women might not have that, especially in the environment that we're living in now. If this actually comes to play of taking away all these benefits that women need so they can survive and take care of their kids, if they're leaving these intimate partner violence relationship, and if they're not in an abusive relationship, they need these benefits, right? And this new administration is just trying to just strangle us. Is only the word that comes to my mind. Strangle us as women as we try to like empower ourselves and grow and making sure we're taking care of ourselves and our families and our children, and especially when it comes to intimate partner violence relationship, they turn a blind eye to it. So what? It happened. Pull up the bootstrings, keep moving, right? And that's the message that a lot of women are hearing when they turn on the news and talk to, and when they hear number 45 talk, and other people are getting behind them, you know, as well, and saying it's okay for them to say these things and do these things to women and cut all these programs that women need, that because it's in their backyard, they're not gonna feel it. So it's up to us to make sure that we fight to make sure these policies stay in place and build upon these policies to make sure that women have the resources they need. And say, hell no, you're not going to just take away what we need. You know, we're going to have to fight. We still got to fight way in front of us. And it's not over yet.
I am about to jump out of my chair because this is, I'm sorry, soapbox. You know, the current, I wonder if anybody remembers, and Ashley, maybe you could do it, late 90s, early 2000s, we actually thought we had a shift in perspective around domestic violence. You know, there was more training for police officers to not just turn a blind eye for a minute. Remember, and I can't tell you exactly when, but I remember that they were really serious. You know, both of y'all could get arrested. I mean, they were really serious about treating a domestic violence call less serious for a moment. We had a shift at some point, and you know, whether it, you know, and restraining orders are more, or you just saw a little bit more, whether we've totally shifted away, not only legality that we're getting rid of safety nets, because we do know that women and vulnerable people are more inclined to need these social programs that are needed. But then we have the whole social discourse that says, who cares? We can appoint you to the Supreme Court. Who, you get called names. I mean, so the legality is one thing, the whole social discourse, and where we have other women saying, well, why didn't you say something? It just infuriates me, the message that we're sending, never mind legality of, you know, the public charge law, where immigrants who are already more vulnerable, or, you know, we have more women who live in poverty than men do. So the removal of safety nets and the whole public discourse about, you know, who should receive services you can't be an immigrant and get certain, and all this is just so toxic. And I just don't know where we're going with this, that never mind legality, but the social discourse. My brothers called me last night. This is so interesting, on a three-way. And we were talking about the abuse in our home. And I'm gonna tell you, I was so shocked. And I actually told them about a sexual abuse that happened to me, and they didn't know till last night. We were grown before we called what we lived in abuse, because we didn't have a name for it, a word for it, you know. So I'm really scared at the message we're sending, the direction that we're going, whether it's legality, removal of safety nets, or either the discourse that calls women names for coming out, acknowledging hurt, pain, and when they were assaulted. So I'm gonna stop, but really pissed off.
I don't really have a whole lot to add, because I think you all really, I guess hit the nail on the head. I think this is, yeah, I mean, survivors are going to end up having to stay because there's no access to any of these services, or they're being cut so dramatically. I mean, just trying to get some of the policies pushed through that should be bipartisan are just becoming more challenging, which is really, really sad. Things that are supposed to be protecting survivors. So yeah, thank you. Thanks to the three of you. I think you got it.
Yeah, thank you. And there's just a sort of, we're getting close to being at time, but just one more thing I sort of wanted to bring up is another thing that you commonly hear in these cases. And I think we've heard a lot of it lately, whether we're talking about sexual assault or domestic violence, this idea that like the two solutions are just leave, which we've already kind of talked about why that's not always an option, or at least not an immediate option. And the other one is, well, why didn't they call the cops, or just bringing law enforcement into it. And that is so often not an option either, especially if you are Black, or if you're trans, or if you're an immigrant. You can face criminalization, you can face deportation, or you can just not be believed and nothing happens, and things are only going to get worse because you called and got law enforcement or the courts involved. And even with restraining orders, sadly, you hear cases about people being killed by people they had restraining orders against. Just because it's on a piece of paper doesn't actually make the person stay away, and sometimes it just makes them angry. So I mean, I think it's just really important to name that law enforcement and courts have let survivors of all genders down so many times that it's, that's not necessarily an option, or it might be an option, but it may not be the best option for a lot of people.
Thanks for bringing that up, Jenny, about the stay away orders, the PFAs. They are such a joke, right? Because they don't protect you from nothing. If they choose to show up at your front doorstep, at your place of work, let's fast forward. After all this has happened to me, my business had the nerve to show up to where I currently work at, right? And going down there to get a PFA on him, and being told because he gets medical care, which he did intentionally once he found out I worked for ASO. At that time we was ASO, but now we're federal qualified house centers now, just to harass me. And he told me it was a conflict of interest. They could not give me a PFA. So, but being who I am today and going through what I had to go through, I had a lot of support around me. I bought a meeting right where I work at, and I listen, this cannot happen. This is who he is. The CEO of my organization knows my story, right? And we took steps, not to say we're not going to give him care, but you can get your care somewhere the fuck else, right? And not harass me and my coworkers, because they'll take it to that extreme to give fat. I'm talking about 12 years later. You show up, and it was just so, and believe it or not, what I felt is all that trauma came back. All that fear came back. I was watching myself look over top of my shoulders as I left my job. I'm like, oh no, hell no, I'm not living like this again. So I took it into my own hands. I was empowered. I had support. I like, this is not going to happen. I'm not going down this road again. And with the people around me and my CEO of my organization and other co-workers who rallied around me, we did some things to make sure he had care, but not here. So he wouldn't come and harassing me, and make sure that he didn't do that. And informing the police, even though I knew they weren't going to do nothing because they did nothing in the past. So it can happen even years after you have left.
Thanks so much. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to just give the floor to any of our panelists if you have any last things you'd like to share with our folks who are here before we go.
Just that the decision to leave or stay in this type of situation is completely yours. Hopefully we have guided you towards some solutions. If anybody under our sound of our voice is actually experiencing this, but no judgment, no judgment. I stayed, I left, he came back, he left again, I let him back in, until the time was right for me. I don't have kids, I'm not married, I have a job. So my situation was a little different. And so it was kind of easier for me to completely cut the person off. But I don't know the situation, but it's a very intensely personal one. And only you can make that decision. But just know that you have sisters who support you, who have probably gone through what you're going through. And together we can do it.
I think I would say I may be frustrated, but I am not deterred. That those of us who can will speak and fight for you till you are ready. It takes a village, and it feels isolating. Don't give up hope. I'm frustrated again, but I am empowered and undeterred in terms of continue to fight to elevate this issue and speak up for those who can't speak yet. And just know you're not alone. If it just really doesn't matter how many times you have to do this.
Yeah, I echo everything my sisters just said, that you're not alone in this process. I know when this is happening and it's happening to you, you feel alone. You feel like no one else is going through this but me. That's why we do this, bring this awareness of these videos and bring this National Day of Action to our communities, make sure women know that there is people who have gone through this. There is women that are here to support you and that you're not alone. And there's no shame in saying, I'm not ready. When you're ready, you'll know, right? Like we said earlier on, make sure you have a plan and get some resources. Use them, get that hotline. It might not be ready for you to use it then, but like I said, have some tools, not some rules.
I just wanted to share a couple additional resources that I think are, kind of timely considering the conversations that are happening around the country. There's some, I think, misunderstanding or just lack of information around the ability for undocumented individuals to be able to access services, but there are protections through federal law that do allow them to receive emergency shelter and other services that are for life and safety. But if you have questions or concerns, somebody that's struggling with this and not sure where to go because of their status, there's Casa de Esperanza, and they operate the National Latina Network, as well as Asista. And their website's asistahelp.org, ASISTA. But they provide lots of information around VAWA self-petitions and U visas, T visas, and other legal status relief. So I just wanted to share that because I think it's really important that we highlight those areas.
Great, thank you all so much. And I just, before we go, I wanted to call your attention to two things. So one is that the video that we played at the beginning of this is available for streaming and for download on our website, pwn-usa.org. If you hit the tab that says PWNCares, you can find all the resources. There's also a discussion guide. So if you are a service provider or you have a support group or you're having a meeting, any context where it might be a useful conversation to have, those resources are available for you. And you should feel free to reach out to me if if you have any trouble finding them or need more information about how to use them. And the second thing is just to remind folks that, we're talking about policy changes like the social safety net and laws that make people more vulnerable to violence. The election is 2 weeks away. Go out and vote, and we are having our national Get Out the Vote call day tomorrow. It's connected to our day of action because these things are not separate. Elections have consequences on policy, and so we need folks to get to vote. We need folks to turn out the people who they see eye to eye with to vote. We really need our communities to get out there and vote. Apathy is the enemy. We really, really need to show up in force this year. So hopefully you all will join us. All you have to do to join is call or text at least 5 friends tomorrow and remind them to vote. If you're in a state where early voting has already started, remind them that they can go ahead and vote early. And you can get more information about that on our website as well. So I want to thank everybody for being here, especially for our panelists, for sharing your stories, for sharing resources, for sharing yourselves, and thank you to all of our participants and to anyone who watches the recording later. We appreciate you all. So I hope everyone has a good day, and please help keep spreading the word about our day of action to end violence against women living with HIV.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Jenny.
Bye.
Thank you.